I was setting the flatware when the plate flew past my ear, shattering. "Don't touch that." Lana's voice was steel. Ethan stood 3 steps away, but turned his face. 56 days later. I stood in a courtroom, watching them sign the order to leave the apartment I secretly owned. Between those moments was a secret buried by my late husband, an unopened letter, and a plan for quiet justice. You think you know the ending. You haven't heard the cold click of a key returning to its owner. My name is Marjorie Blake. I am 62 years old. For 34 years, I was a wife, and for 28 of those, I was a shift manager at Northwind Foods. Now, I am a widow, and I live in my son's house. It was a Friday evening in Cedar Ridge, a neighborhood where the lawns were all the same shade of aggressive green. The house, belonging to my son, Ethan, and his wife, Lana, was a testament to modern architecture, all glass, steel, and cold, white surfaces. It was a house built to be looked at, not lived in. This was meant to be another perfect family dinner, a phrase Lana used that translated to a rigid, high-stakes performance where I was the most likely prop to fail. I was moving with the practiced efficiency of my old job, setting the heavy, designer flatware. My hands, which once signed shipping manifests, were now just tools for arranging napkins. I was folding the last one, aligning its edge perfectly with the placemat. When I reached for the steak knives in their wooden block, Lana's hand shot out, clamping down on my wrist. Her fingers were bony, but gripped like a vice. "Don't touch that part." Her voice was not angry. It was cold, flat, like a dropped file. She wasn't warning me. She was commanding me. She yanked the steak knife from my grasp, a sharp, sudden movement that unbalanced me. I pulled my arm back, a reflexive flinch. My elbow connected with the stack of heavy porcelain dinner plates beside me. Before I could steady them, Lana shoved the stack. It was not an accidental bump. It was not a reaction. It was a deliberate, controlled push. The top plate slid free. Its heavy ceramic edge didn't hit me full on. It glanced, a sharp, hard scrape across my right cheekbone. The plate cartwheeled onto the polished concrete floor and exploded. The sound was shockingly loud in the sterile quiet. A hot, sharp sting flared on my face. I touched it. No blood, just the immediate, burning blush of humiliation. I looked at Ethan. He was 10 feet away, sitting on the low, grey sofa that looked like it belonged in a museum lobby. He heard the crash. He had to. His head turned, not toward me, not toward the sound of his wife assaulting his mother, but toward the 80-inch television screen silent on the wall. He looked at the blank screen for a second. Then his thumb found the remote on the cushion beside him. He pressed the power button. The television flashed to life, and the canned, aggressive cheer of a game show filled the room. He increased the volume. My gaze locked onto the back of his shoulder. It was a broad shoulder, one I had relied on. Now, it was a wall, turned definitively away from the wreckage, insulating himself with noise. "You're messing up the table," Lana hissed, her attention already off me and on the microscopic spray of porcelain dust. "Guests are coming." The sting on my cheek pulsed. What guests? My voice was thin. We never had guests. Mine. The word was a slammed door. Her guests, not ours. I was contamination in her perfect space. The familiar urge to apologize, to make myself smaller, rose in my throat. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask my son why he was watching a quiz show while his life shattered in the next room. I swallowed the words. They tasted like ash. I bent down, my knees cracking in the silence between the television's shouts. I began to pick up the pieces. The sharp edges of the plate bit into my fingertips, grounding me. Each white fragment I gathered felt like a metaphor for the last few years. A piece of myself I had allowed to be broken off and discarded in the name of keeping a fragile peace. My eyes drifted past the shards on the floor, toward the liquor cabinet against the far wall. On top of it sat the object. It was a boxy, rectangular thing, completely shrouded in a thick, black velvet cloth. Lana had placed it there 2 days ago. This was the that in her command. Don't touch that. She hadn't been worried about the knives. She had been worried about her secret. An old question, one I had pushed down, surfaced. What is that? She had been obsessive about it, wiping it down every night, not with a dusting rag, but with white cotton gloves, as if she were a curator handling a priceless, volatile artifact. The physical pain on my cheek was already fading, the skin numbing. But as I cupped the broken porcelain in my palm, something else took its place. It was not pain. It was a cold, quiet certainty. The silence in this house was no longer just empty space. It was the heavy, pressurized quiet that comes before a storm makes landfall. I moved in with them after Graham's funeral. My room, Ethan insisted, was just temporary, until I got back on my feet. It was the former den, a box in the center of the house with no windows, sharing a thin wall with the laundry. The air was always stale with the faint, chemical smell of fabric softener. My new life found its rhythm in the hours before they woke. I would rise at 5:30. The house silent and dark. The concrete floors cold under my socks. I would make the coffee, timing the brew to finish just as Lana's alarm sounded upstairs. I cleaned the glass panels of the staircase, wiping away the fingerprints from the day before. I folded the kitchen towels, the ones Lana insisted on, thick white cotton that never seemed to dry properly, and I would wash them, unasked. I was a ghost maintaining the machinery of a life I was not part of. This invisibility was my armor, but it was rarely effective. Lana conducted a daily inventory of my failures. A single water ring on the quartz countertop, a hand towel in the guest bath folded with the seam facing out instead of in, the smell of the air freshener I used in my windowless room. She held the can once, her nose wrinkled, and said, "This smells cheap. It clashes with the diffusers." Ethan worked late. That was the official story. He left before I was finished with the coffee and returned after I had retreated to my den. I learned to distinguish the sound of his hybrid pulling into the drive from the other neighborhood cars. I memorized the precise weight of his footsteps on the floating stairs, a heavy, weary tread that signaled a bad day, or a light, quick step that meant Lana was waiting for him. I measured my breathing, waiting for the sound of their bedroom door clicking shut upstairs, a signal that I was safe from interaction, safe from the crossfire I always seemed to walk into. Sometimes, standing at the sink, rinsing the coffee filter, I would see Graham. He would be in the backyard of our old house in Harborview, the one with the peeling paint and the foundation issues. He was always watering his roses, a specific, pale yellow breed he was inexplicably proud of. He would be wearing his faded blue baseball cap, his back to me. Then I would blink, and the vision would dissolve, leaving only the sterile reflection of Lana's stainless steel, 6-burner gas range. Graham's heart had simply stopped on a Tuesday morning, a morning so windy it had knocked the power out. The Harbourview house was gone now, or at least, it was supposed to be. It was sealed, Ethan said, awaiting sale. The closing was complicated. The transfer papers were not quite ready. He had waved his hand dismissively when I asked to see them, and I, paralysed by grief and gratitude for his generosity, had not asked again. I had been packing the last of Graham's winter clothes when I found it. Tucked inside the lining of his old leather suitcase was a thick, brown manila envelope, the flap sealed with heavy-duty packing tape. His handwriting, a strong, clear cursive I had not seen in years, was on the front. Marjorie, it read. Only open when truly needed. It sat now at the bottom of my own suitcase, beneath my sweaters, in the windowless room. I had not opened it. Every day. The definition of truly needed seemed to expand, but I was too afraid to look. I was afraid of what it might contain, and more afraid of what it might demand of me. My attention, my fear, was focused on something else. The object on the liquor cabinet. The item from the night of the broken plate. Lana called it a guest's gift, but it was an obsession. Every evening, just before dinner, she would perform the ritual. She would retrieve a pair of white cotton gloves from a drawer. She would carefully lift the black velvet cloth, wipe the object beneath. I could only make out a hard, rectangular shape, and then replace the cloth, meticulously smoothing its folds. She never touched it with her bare skin. It was an anchor for my growing anxiety. It was the that I was forbidden to touch. Then, last night, I had been awake, the lack of air in my room making sleep impossible. It was late, past 2 a.m. I heard Ethan come home. I heard his steps on the stairs, heavier than usual. Then, silence. A few minutes later, the bright, blue-white light of a phone screen cut through the darkness under my door. He was standing right outside. I heard the distinct thwip of a new text message arriving. I held my breath. I could hear his thumb tapping rapidly on the screen. The sliver of light under my door flickered, and for just a second, I saw his shadow cast against the hallway wall. He had turned, and the light from his phone was aimed directly across the living room, illuminating the liquor cabinet, catching the soft, light-absorbing texture of that black velvet cloth. My contribution began to be itemized. It started not with a request, but with an expectation. The high-end, organic groceries Lana insisted on food I rarely ate began appearing on my credit card. It's just temporary. Mum, Ethan said, his eyes fixed on his glowing laptop screen. I'll transfer it back when my paycheck clears. The check never seemed to clear, but the grocery list, sent to my phone via text, grew longer. I was paying interest on my own existence, a recurring service charge for the air I breathed in their house. Then, Lana scheduled a wine tasting. It was not a party. It was a networking event for her vague, consulting business. For 2 days, I was the prep cook. I diced. I simmered. I hand-washed and polished dozens of their fragile, paper-thin wine glasses until my fingers were raw. The kitchen, usually sterile, smelled of roasted garlic and thyme. I was arranging the final platter when Lana walked in. She was wearing a black dress that looked like it was sculpted from shadows. She did not look at the food. She looked at me, my apron stained, my hair pulled back in a net. Marjorie, she said. She only used my first name when issuing a directive. The guests will be here in 20 minutes. I need you to stay in your room. We can't have the atmosphere feeling rustic. Rustic. It was a clean, sharp word, a financial term to write off a bad asset. I was a bad asset. I untied the apron, placed it on the counter, and walked to my windowless den. I did not eat any of the food I had spent 2 days preparing. The depreciation of my value was calculated and precise. One evening, in a rare moment when Ethan was home before 10, I started to tell a story about my time at Northwind Foods, about a crisis when a refrigeration truck failed on a 90-degree day. It was 12,000 pounds of frozen seafood, I said, and I had to. Ethan held up his hand, not unkindly, which was worse. Mum, please, let's not tell the Northwind stories. It's a new era. Nobody cares about shipping manifests. My past was an anecdote to be embarrassed by, a liability in his new portfolio. A week later, he cornered me by the coffee machine. Mum, I need these signed. It's for the Harbourview house closing. He fanned out a small stack of papers on the quartz counter. They were photocopies, blurry and pale grey, the text bleeding into the page. Lana's contacts found a way to optimize the taxes. It saves us a lot on capital gains. Us. He said us. I looked for a dollar amount, a percentage, anything clear. I saw only grey lines and a signature tab. I just need your signature here. And here? He pointed. I signed the blurry paper. My signature, the one that had co-signed his first car loan, looked shaky, an old debt being called in. Things began to arrive at the house. A delivery man, grunting with effort, brought a heavy, steel-grey box. It was a mini-safe, the kind hotels use. Lana signed for it, her movements quick. A souvenir for a client, she said to the air when she saw me watching. Security protocols. She began taking long project meetings, her phone always silenced, her location sharing always off. I was taking out the recycling when I saw the navigation screen still active in her unlocked car. A recent destination was pinned 118 Briarstone Avenue, Kingsley Heights. It was a new, high-end condominium tower, the kind of place that advertised valet parking and a rooftop pool. The mail, which I used to retrieve, was now intercepted. One afternoon, I sifted through the junk mail and found it a thick, cream-coloured envelope, heavy in my hand. The return address was embossed, not printed. Royston and Pike, attorneys at law. It was addressed specifically, formally, to Mrs. Marjorie Blake, inheritor. My fingers had just closed around it when Ethan's hand covered mine. Oh, junk mail, he said, too quickly. More legal spam about the estate. I'll handle it. He slid it from my grasp, his smile tight, and the letter vanished into his briefcase. That night, sleep was impossible. The air in the den was thick and still. I heard a noise, not a loud one, but a small, metallic click. I eased my door open. In the living room, illuminated only by the blue light of the cable box, was Lana. She was in front of the liquor cabinet. The black velvet cloth was folded neatly on the floor. The object, the guest's gift, was the mini-safe. She was wearing her white cotton gloves. The safe door was open. As I watched, my heart climbing into my throat, she removed a large, heavy ring of keys. There were dozens of them. She also pulled out a small, black USB drive. She held them, her head tilted, as if counting. I took a step back, and my shoulder brushed the drywall. It was the quietest sound, but Lana's head snapped up. In one fluid motion, She swept the keys and the drive back into the safe, snapped the door shut, and threw the black cloth back over it. She did not turn around. She stood perfectly still in the darkness, a sentinel guarding a tomb. I retreated to my room. I sat on my cot, my hands shaking. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed and took out the manila envelope from Graham. I laid it on my lap. The tape was still sealed. Only open when truly needed. I stared at the wall, the silence of the house pressing in. When, Graham, I thought? When is truly needed? It was Sunday. Another performance of the perfect family dinner, which meant the air was already tight with unspoken rules. I was doing the one thing I was still permitted to do, setting the table. I was laying out the heavy, cold silverware, my movements automatic. I reached for the stack of porcelain plates, the same set as the one Lana had broken. I had just picked one up when her voice, a low hiss, cut across the room. "Don't touch that." She was standing by the liquor cabinet, her arms crossed. She was guarding it, guarding the black-draped safe. She wasn't talking about the plates. She was talking about her territory. I flinched, and my hand jerked. She moved faster than I could have imagined. She didn't shove the stack. She swatted my hand, a sharp, stinging slap across my knuckles. The plate I was holding fell, hitting the edge of the glass table and then crashing onto the concrete floor. It shattered into a dozen pieces. The sound echoed. It was the same sound, the same humiliation. Ethan looked up from his phone, his face a mask of irritation. "Mom," he sighed, his voice low and sharp. "Don't make Lana stressed. You know how she gets before dinner. Don't make Lana stressed. The sting on my hand was nothing. The sting on my cheek from the first plate was nothing. This was the blow that landed. My son, my child, was telling me that my presence, my simple, breathing presence, was a stressor. I was an irritant, a problem to be managed, a rustic element in his new era. Lana was smirking, a tiny, satisfied upturn of her lips. I looked at the broken pieces on the floor. I looked at the black-shrouded safe. I looked at my son, who had already looked back down at his phone. The issue handled, the stressor reprimanded. I took one step back. My heel was quiet on the floor. Lana's smirk wavered, expecting tears or an apology. I took another step back. It was not a retreat. It was not fear. It was the physical act of Louis Jaleh. I was stepping back to see the whole, ugly picture clearly for the first time. I was gathering momentum. "I'll clean it," Ethan said, not moving. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "You won't?" I turned and walked away from the shattered plate, away from the table I would never set again, away from my son. I walked to my windowless room. I closed the door. I heard Lana start to say something, but the latch clicked shut, cutting her off. For a moment, I just stood in the stale, dark air. I thought, this is truly needed. I pulled my suitcase from under the cot. My hands were perfectly steady. I unzipped the lining. The thick manila envelope felt heavy, a solid, forgotten weight. I sat on the edge of the cot and ripped the packing tape. It made a loud, satisfying, tearing sound. Inside, there was a letter. It was not a sympathy card. It was on Graham's old, heavy-stock letterhead. His handwriting was firm. "Marjorie," it began. Underneath the letter were documents, thick stacks of them, certificates of incorporation. Bank statements from accounts I had never heard of, investment portfolios, and deeds. A list was stapled to the top. A portfolio summary, 9 properties. 9. Not just the Harbourview house, but commercial buildings, apartments, a small lot by the coast. Then I saw it. One line, in bold type. 118 Briarstone Avenue, Kingsley Heights. Lana's project, the building she drove to, the navigation screen in her car. I scanned the document attached to it. It was the deed. It was not in Ethan's name. It was not in Graham's name. It was held by a legal entity. Halcyon Gate, LLC. And the final page, a sealed power of attorney, listed the sole beneficiary and owner of Halcyon Gate, LLC, Marjorie Blake. Me. I owned it. I owned Kingsley Heights. My breath hitched, just once. I turned back to Graham's letter. Marjorie, my love, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the world has become what I feared it might. I did not leave you unprotected. I left you armed. You were always the smart one, the one who saw the numbers. I just hid them for you. Halcyon Gate is yours. Everything is yours. Ethan is a good man, but he is weak to flattery, and that woman is not what she seems. I've prepared everything. Do not let them sell Harbourview. It's yours. They are all yours. Call Caleb Royston at Royston and Pike. He is the only one who knows the full picture. He has been waiting for your call. And Marge, don't trust anyone to hold your keys for you. Don't trust anyone to hold your keys. Lana's keys, the keys in the safe, the USB drive. My hand found my phone on the small nightstand. I looked at the number on the letterhead. My fingers did not tremble. I dialed. Royston and Pike, how may I direct your— Hello, I said, my voice clear and cold. This is Marjorie Blake. I need to speak to Mr. Caleb Royston. Please tell him I am opening the envelope. There was a pause, a muffled sound. Mrs. Blake, we've been expecting you. That night, after the silent, furious dinner I did not attend, after the house was dark, I packed a small duffel bag. I packed my toothbrush, a change of clothes, and the original documents from Graham's envelope. I zipped the bag and placed it by the door. I looked at my reflection in the dark, blank screen of the small television in the corner. A smile touched my lips. It was a terrible smile, as thin and sharp as a thread of surgical steel stitching a wound closed. I left at 6 a.m., before the sun, before the coffee was made. My small duffel bag was light in my hand. I did not leave a note. I took a rideshare to the address on the letterhead. The offices of Royston and Pike were not in a glass tower. They were in a solid, old-money brick building with polished brass fixtures. Caleb Royston was waiting for me. He was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and a suit that was impeccably tailored. He didn't offer condolences. He offered a thick file. Mrs. Blake, he said, closing the conference room door. Your husband was a very methodical man. He set up Halcyon Gate LLC 12 years ago. As of his passing, you are its sole beneficiary and director. He slid a summary sheet across the polished mahogany table. Graham did not just manage. He built. I looked at the numbers. The net monthly income from the 9 properties, the balance of the investment accounts, the untouched savings, held in a high-yield account under the LLC, not in my name, not in Ethan's. It was enough. It was more than enough. I could have lived in luxury for the rest of my life without ever moving into that windowless room. The humiliation I'd felt over paying for Lana's organic groceries burned with a new, cold fire. Kingsley Heights, I said, my voice flat. 118 Briarstone Avenue. Caleb nodded, flipping to a new tab. The flagship, highly profitable. Graham managed it himself for a time, which was unusual for him. Do you have a tenant list? Right here? He turned the file. I scanned the names. I didn't see Blake or Whitfield. Apartment 7B, I said. He found the line. Ah, that one. Leased to a Mr. E. Whitfield. It was leased under an old family and friends agreement from your husband's personal management days. The rate is nominal. Nominal, I repeated. It was practically zero. They weren't just living in my son's house. They were living in my building, a building I owned, for next to nothing. Lana's project was living off my assets while I slept in her laundry-scented den. Mr. Royston, I said. My first directive. I want that lease normalized. I want it brought up to the current market rate, which I see here is substantial. Caleb's pen hovered. It will be a significant increase. I am aware. I want a formal, legal 30-day notice sent to the tenant of record. No exceptions? It will be signed by Halcyon Gate, LLC. My name will not be on it. Understood. He made a crisp note. Second, the Harborview House. My son gave me papers to sign. He said it was to optimize taxes on the sale. Caleb's face tightened. Mrs. Blake, I have the original file for Harborview here. The sale cannot be completed. We've been stalled for 2 months. Why? Because the document Graham left with us, the original power of sale, stipulate that the property cannot be sold for less than 90% of the assessed market value, and requires your direct, wet ink signature to execute. The photocopy your son had you sign, he said, his voice laced with disdain, was a blurry, non-binding copy of a preliminary authorization. It's legally worthless. He has been trying, and failing, to bypass me and sell it under value. The blurry text, the casual lie. Us. So, the house is still mine? Completely. And it is not on the market. I made sure of that. Good. I took a deep breath. The old Marjorie, the shift manager, took over. Mr. Royston, I am opening a new independent bank account this morning under my name only. I want all personal dividend disbursements directed there. I want all mailing addresses for Halcyon Gate, LLC, and my personal estate changed, effective immediately, to a private post office box, which I will secure today. I want a specific directive sent to the post office blocking all forwarding and noting that no other person is authorized to receive my mail, especially my son. Done? I am also purchasing a new mobile phone today, with a new number. Only you and I will have that number. He nodded, his pen flying. One more thing. I was thinking of Lana's consulting business, her networking, her clients. I want you to pull the commercial tenant leases for the portfolio. Cross-reference the business names with any known clients or associates of Lana Whitfield. If any of them are enjoying a historical favor or a family and friends rate, I want their leases normalized as well. Immediately. Caleb Royston looked up from his notes. For the first time, he smiled. Mrs. Blake, he said. It is a distinct pleasure to finally make your acquaintance. I moved into a small, furnished apartment in a neighborhood I didn't know. A place with a clean lease and a window that faced a brick wall. It was quiet. It was mine. I paid for it with my new debit card, from my new account. The first ripple I sent out hit its target 4 days later. Caleb's email was brief. Notice of lease normalization delivered to apartment 7B, Kingsley Heights. A few hours later, a second email. The tenant in 7B, Mr. E. Whitfield, called the building management office. He was agitated. He demanded to speak to the new owner. And the response I typed back on my new phone. As instructed, Halcyon Gate LLC does not permit direct contact between ownership and tenants. All inquiries must be routed through our legal representatives at Royston and Pike. He was displeased. I allowed myself a small, cold satisfaction. I imagined Ethan, his voice tight with the false authority I had heard him use so many times, being met not with a person he could manipulate, but a policy, a wall as hard and unfeeling as the one he had shown me. The second ripple was for Lana. Caleb's review of the commercial leases in the Halcyon portfolio had been fruitful. One of the tenants in a downtown office building, a boutique marketing firm, had been enjoying a lease at roughly 40% below market value, a historical favour from Graham's old manager. Caleb sent them the same 30-day notice, normalised to market rate or vacate. A week later, Caleb forwarded me a public relations announcement. The marketing firm was streamlining operations and cutting non-essential consultant contracts to absorb new overhead. He highlighted the list of dropped consultants. Lana Whitfield's name was third. Her project had just lost its biggest client, a client who had been, in essence, subsidized by me. I watched the consequences unfold from the quiet of my new apartment. Caleb had investigators, and their reports painted a picture of quiet panic. Ethan had applied for a short-term, high-interest loan. A hot loan. Caleb called it, the kind you take when the bank has already said no. The interest rate was, in Caleb's words, extortionate. He was trying to get the money to cover the massive new rent on Kingsley Heights, to keep Lana from finding out their golden goose was cooked. But the true rot was deeper. Graham had been methodical, but he had also been trusting. His old building manager at Kingsley Heights, a man Ethan had apparently known since college, was a weak link. Marjorie, Caleb said over our secure line, the preliminary audit of Kingsley Heights is concerning. There are 2 significant withdrawals from the Capital Repair Fund in the last 6 months. They were coded for HVAC upgrades, but the work was never done. How much? I asked. Enough to be a felony, signed off by the old manager, a Mr. Davies, a friend of your son's, I believe. He's suspended, I said. It was not a question. As of an hour ago, pending a full forensic audit, I've already dispatched a professional third-party management team to take over the building, effective immediately. We'll be implementing new, transparent accounting protocols by Monday. This was work, I understood. Not setting tables, not folding towels. This was logistics. This was management. I was, after all, my husband's wife. Then came the final damning piece. The safe. The black-draped object on the liquor cabinet. We ran the credit card chargebacks from Lana's known accounts. As you asked, Caleb reported. She purchased a Kensington model mini-safe 3 months ago. The delivery address was your son's home. We also had the new management team check the building's asset log. He paused, and I could hear the rustle of paper. Every building has a master key set and a fireproof drive containing the tenant ledgers and maintenance codes, held by the manager. Mr. Davies reported the building's official set stolen during a supposed break-in 2 months ago. The serial number on the replacement set he ordered. It matches the serial number on the Kensington model safe Lana Whitfield purchased. I closed my eyes. The keys. The USB drive. Don't touch that. The memory of her hissing those words. The memory of her shoving my hand. It all refocused. It was never just a secret. It was the evidence. She was holding the master keys to my building. She and her friend, Davies, were siphoning money from my repair funds, and she kept the ledger, the proof of their theft, on her liquor cabinet, shrouded in black velvet like a cheap magician's trick. She was so arrogant. She kept it right in the open. My fear had not been that I would break her precious souvenir. Her fear was that I would accidentally uncover her crime. I did not call Ethan. I did not drive to the house and confront Lana. I did not need to. There was no catharsis in yelling. The old Marjorie would have wept. The new Marjorie, the director of Halcyon Gate LLC, simply pulled the curtains closed in her small apartment. I let the legal notices, the audits, and the quiet, crushing weight of their own actions do the work for me. The strings were pulling taut. All I had to do was wait for the sound of them snapping. The first of the next month arrived. The 30th day grace period expired. The new, full market rent for apartment 7B was not paid. On the 31st day, the law firm of Royston and Pike, representing Halcyon Gate LLC, formally filed a petition for eviction against the tenant of record, Mr. E. Whitfield. My old phone, which I had left in the windowless room, was now in a box in my new closet. I had charged it once, out of a morbid curiosity. It was full. Dozens of missed calls from Ethan, voicemails, escalating from confused, "Mom, where are you?" to angry, "Are you trying to ruin us?" Mom, to, finally, desperate. He must have found Caleb's number through the management company. Caleb forwarded me the email thread. Ethan had written, "This is a misunderstanding. This is a family matter. We need to speak to the owner." Caleb's reply was a copy-paste of the legal statute. Ethan's next email was a raw plea. "Please, she's my mother. There must be some family grace. Lana she's under so much pressure. She says this is all Marjorie's fault, that she was always a burden." A burden. Caleb sent me the final document, the one authorizing the court action. "Marjorie," he wrote, "this is the last step. If you have any reservations, now is the time." I printed the page at a local copy shop, in the blank space for special directives. I wrote 2 words, no exceptions. I signed my name, Marjorie Blake. My signature was not the shaky, uncertain script from the blurry photocopy Ethan had given me. It was thin, yes, but it was a firm, straight line of ink, as final as a closing door. I faxed it back to his office. While the legal clock ticked on the eviction, the audit clock in the background struck midnight. Caleb called me on my new, secure phone. "The forensic audit on Kingsley Heights is complete," he said. "It's exactly as we thought, but worse. A slow, steady drain from the repair funds. Small-scale theft, every month, for 2 years. Davies," I said. "Davies." He confirmed. It all leads back to him. He was sloppy at the end, started routing it to a personal account. The full file, including the evidence from the safe Lana purchased, has been transferred to the district attorney's office. They are very interested. The pressure had apparently found its weakest point. Lana, the new building manager at Kingsley Heights, a crisp, efficient woman named Rosa sent a security log update to Caleb, who forwarded it to me. Incident report Tuesday, 10 p.m. Tenant in 7B, Ms. L. Whitfield, observed exiting the building with one large suitcase and a designer duffel bag. Entered a black rideshare vehicle. Did not return. She was gone. She had seen the numbers, realized the game was over, and cut her losses. She had abandoned her networking, her project, and her husband. She had left him alone to face the consequences she had co-authored. Rosa's next report was 2 days later. Noise complaints. Apartment 7B. Sounds of items being thrown. Intermittent. Crying. Heard by tenants in 6B. He was alone, packing up the life he had built on my assets and my silence. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel joy. I felt a great, heavy, leaden gravity. The day before the hearing, I left my apartment. I went to Red Alder Garden, a place Graham and I had visited once, long ago. I sat on a bench and watched the koi in the pond, their bright orange bodies moving with purpose beneath the green water. My hands were shaking, not with fear, not with rage. They were shaking from the sheer, sustained effort of holding the line, of not falling back into the old role of the peacemaker, the absorber, the burden. I was here, in this park, to steady them before they had to lift the final weight. Caleb called me while I watched the fish. "Marjorie, it's set for tomorrow at 9. You don't need to be there. It's an uncontested eviction at this point. A procedural default. I can handle it." I looked at my hand. It was still. "No, Caleb," I said. "I'll be there." "It's not necessary. He may not even show up." "I know," I said. "But I need to be. I've heard the sound of a plate breaking for me. I've heard the sound of my son's silence, tomorrow. I want to hear the gavel strike for me." That night, in my quiet apartment, I took one thing from my old life out of my bag. It was the original brass key to the front door of the Harborview house. The house Ethan had tried to sell from under me. I set it on the small, clean-grained wooden table I had bought. The overhead light caught the worn, brass edges. I looked at its reflection on the polished wood. For years, this key had represented a past I had lost, a memory of Graham that was painful and blinding. Tonight, it was just a key, a piece of property, an asset. The past was still bright, but it was no longer blinding me. It was just a fact, and I was finally seeing it clearly. The courtroom was small and smelled of old paper and floor wax. It was not a high-drama trial. It was 9 a.m. on the default docket, a conveyor belt of human failure. I sat in the last row, on the hard wooden bench, a woman in a grey coat no one would look at twice. Caleb was at the plaintiff's table, his files stacked in a single, neat rectangle. Ethan was at the defendant's table. He looked small. He had not slept. His suit, one I had bought him for his college graduation, was wrinkled. He was sitting next to a lawyer, a man whose cheap suit and tired expression screamed, "Last minute hire." Next to Ethan's lawyer was an empty chair. Lana's chair. She was not here. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and a sharp voice, picked up the file. Case number 47-B, Halcyon Gate LLC versus E. Whitfield. This is a petition for eviction due to non-payment. She scanned the first page. I see a 30-day notice of lease adjustment, delivered and signed for. I see the original family and friends contract, which is clearly expired. I see the new, standardized lease, which was declined. I see a failure to pay the new legal rate. I see the balance owed. I see the request for repossession. She looked up at Ethan's lawyer. Counselor, does your client dispute these facts? Ethan's lawyer stood, shuffling his papers. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Whitfield. This is a complicated situation. This isn't just a landlord-tenant issue. There is a family relationship. The judge held up one thin hand. Stop. I do not care if the plaintiff is his mother, his brother, or his mortal enemy. The law is the law. Was the notice valid? Well, yes, but was the new rate legal and in line with market value? Your Honor, the shock of the increase. The shock, the judge repeated, her voice dripping with ice, is not a legal defense. Is the owner, Halcyon Gate, LLC, within its rights to set the rate? Yes, Your Honor. But we believe the new ownership is acting in a predatory. Caleb stood, his voice calm and clear. Your Honor, if the defendant is attempting to claim new owner abuse, the plaintiff would like to submit this. He held up a single, black USB drive, the same drive I had seen Lana wipe down with white gloves. This, Caleb said, is a copy of the full forensic audit of Kingsley Heights, finalized this week. It details the transparent, new management protocols, and it also details the significant financial malfeasance by the previous manager, Mr. Davies, who was a close associate of the defendant and his partner. Ethan's lawyer went pale. Ethan sank lower in his chair. The new ownership, Caleb continued, is not predatory. It is simply solvent, and it is no longer being stolen from. The judge looked at Ethan's lawyer. Do you have anything else? Counselor, anything relevant? The lawyer deflated. No, Your Honor. The judge sighed. The facts are clear. The previous lease is null. The notice of increase is valid. Rent has not been paid. The petition is granted. The tenant, Mr. E. Whitfield, is ordered to vacate apartment 7B at 118 Briarstone Avenue within 10 days. My hand was in my pocket. My fingers were closed around a small square of fabric. It was a piece of the black velvet cloth I had cut from the shroud that once covered the safe. The cloth that had represented a dark, forbidden secret. Now, it was just a remnant. A small, soft shield I held as the final, sharp blow landed. Ethan's lawyer was packing his briefcase. Ethan just sat there, frozen. Then, slowly, he turned his head. His eyes, desperate and red-rimmed, scanned the gallery. He was looking for me. He was looking for his mother. His gaze passed over me, stopped, and then passed on. He did not recognize me. I was not the woman who had cried over a broken plate. I was not the burden who had stayed in the windowless room. I was a strange woman in a grey coat, my back perfectly straight, my expression calm. I met his gaze, and I did not look away. The judge banged her gavel. The sound was a sharp, hard crack. I closed my eyes. For just 1 second. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I did not feel sadness. I felt the simple, heavy satisfaction of a number being corrected, a ledger being balanced. Justice, not as a passion, but as an equation, finding its rightful sum. I stood before the next case was called. I turned, and I walked to the side door, the one that led to the public staircase, not the main elevator. I pushed it open. I stepped out into the hallway. the sound of the gavel still echoing. No one looked at me. No one saw me go. No one in that courtroom knew the owner of Halcyon Gate LLC had been sitting beside them all along. He had 10 days. He used 8 of them to pack, and the 9th to make one last, desperate call. Not to me. He called Caleb's office. He requested a final meeting with a representative from Halcyon Gate to discuss transition logistics. Caleb forwarded me the request. "You don't have to do this, Marjorie. The order is final." "I know," I replied. "But I will. Book the small conference room. Tomorrow at 10. Just me." I arrived at 9:30. I did not look like the woman who had left his house. My hair, which I had worn in a practical, short cut for 30 years, was now styled. It was still grey, but it was sharp. I was wearing a dark navy sheath dress, a single string of Graham's pearls, and a jacket with a structured shoulder. I was Mrs. Blake, director of Halcyon Gate LLC. I was seated at the head of the long mahogany table when the door opened. Caleb showed him in, then quietly closed the door, leaving us alone. Ethan stopped. He physically froze, his hand still on the doorknob. He was looking at me, but his brain could not process what his eyes were seeing. This was not the rustic element. This was not the woman who smelled like cheap air freshener. This was not his mother. "Sit down, Ethan," I said. My voice, calm and low, seemed to shock him into motion. He sat in the chair farthest from me at the other end of the table. He looked exhausted, his face puffy, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He opened his mouth. "Mom." "No," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the air. "Stop. Today, in this room, there is no mother and son. That relationship is suspended. I am Marjorie Blake, the owner. You are E. Whitfield, the tenant. This is a meeting between those two parties. Do you understand?" He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He nodded, a single, jerky movement. "Good," I said. "You requested a meeting. You have one." The silence stretched. He had come here to plead with a faceless corporation, a representative. He did not know how to speak to me. He began, his voice cracking. It was Lana. She controlled everything. She got in my head. I didn't know what to do." "You let her," I said. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I did. I hid things. That letter. From you. From your firm." He looked at the Royston and Pike logo on the coaster in front of him. "It came after the funeral. I saw Inheritor. I thought it was just about the Harborview house. I gave it to Lana. She said it was just legal noise. She said she'd handle it." "You took what Graham gave you," I said. "That family and friends rate, and you assumed it was your right. You didn't just use it. You abused it. You and Lana, and your friend, Mr. Davies." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a new fear. He had not realized I knew about Davies. "You used my husband's gift as a slush fund," I stated. "You let her steal from his legacy, from my legacy." "I didn't know," he cried, the word tearing out of him. "Not about the money, I swear. Mom. I swear. I just wanted her to be happy. I didn't want to lose the apartment. It was all we had." "It was never yours," I said. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the one Caleb had given me that first day, the asset summary of Halcyon Gate LLC. I slid it down the long, polished table. It stopped. Perfectly. In front of him. "You were living in my house," I said, "while you were stealing from my building." His eyes scanned the page, his brain struggling with the words. He found the line. 118 Briarstone Avenue, Kingsley Heights, and then the owner summary, Marjorie Blake. He looked up at me, his face a mask of utter, complete devastation. "You. It's all yours? It's all mine?" He finally broke. He put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with dry, silent sobs. I did not move. I did not go to him. I sat, and I waited. After a minute, he looked up. "I'm sorry," he wept. "I am so sorry." I looked at him. The power had shifted. Absolutely. But I had to know. "Ethan," I asked, my voice quiet, "I have one question for you. If I were still the woman in the windowless room, if you had come here today and found a stranger behind this desk, and you didn't know I owned a single thing, would you be this sorry? Would you be apologizing at all?" He met my eyes, and he had the good grace, the one shred of honesty left, not to say yes. He just looked away, and the truth of his silence filled the room. I stood up. The eviction stands. 10 days mean 10 days. You'll find your own apartment. You'll pay for it with your own money. You won't come to me for a loan. You won't use my name as a reference. All privileges, all family favors, are over. You're on your own. He looked like I had struck him. Where will I go?" "That is no longer my concern," I said. "You are an adult. You will figure it out." I walked to the door. I paused, my hand on the brass handle. I looked back at the shell of my son, adrift at the far end of that polished table. "One last thing," I said. He looked up, his eyes begging. "This," I said, gesturing to the room, to the eviction, to the end of his life as he knew it, "is the consequence. But it is not an ending. When your actions are different, truly different, not because of what you can lose, but because you know what is right, you will find a door is open." "Mum," he whispered. I did not answer. I opened the door and walked out, leaving him there. The air in the hallway was cool. I left behind the faint, sharp scent of the black tea I had been drinking, and I left behind the large, empty, mother-shaped space in his life. This was not revenge. This was a boundary, drawn in steel. A week later, I used my own key to open the front door of the Harborview house. The air was stale, still. The living room was a graveyard of furniture, all shrouded in white sheets, like sleeping ghosts. The house was mine. It had never been sold. I didn't pull off the sheets. I went to the kitchen, found the box I had packed, and took out a small, lace tablecloth. I found a card table in the study and set it up in the center of the sheet-covered living room. I laid the cloth. I set 2 places, 2 sets of my best silver, 2 wine glasses, a dinner, just for me and Graham, in a room full of ghosts. As I was lighting the candles, my new phone buzzed on the counter. It was Caleb. "It's done. Marjorie," he said. His voice was clean, no emotion. "The DA is indicting Davies on 2 counts of felony embezzlement. The investigation is officially closed, and the audit team finalized the recovery. All missing funds, plus interest, have been returned to the Halcyon Capital account." "Thank you, Caleb," I said, "for everything." You did the work, Marjorie, he replied. I just filed the papers. I hung up. The investigation was over. The money was back. The last string had been tied off. I lit the second candle. As I did, the doorbell rang. The sound was loud, an intrusion in the heavy silence. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Ethan. He was wearing a cheap-looking button-down shirt, the kind I'd never seen him in. He looked thin, and he was holding a crumpled brown paper bag. I opened the door. He did not look at me. He looked at his feet. I'm not asking to stay, he said, his voice raw. I have 2 more days. I know. I'm here to return these. He held out the paper bag. The keys, the master keys, and the USB drive. They belong to you. They belong to the owner. I looked at him, standing on the stoop of my house. Come in, I said. He hesitated, then stepped just inside, staying on the doormat. He wouldn't look at the sheet-covered furniture. He just stood there, diminished. I wanted, he said, his voice breaking. I just wanted to see the table set right. One more time. I looked at the small card table I had set for 2. Then I looked at the bag in his hand. I walked to the kitchen and took one new, clean porcelain plate from my box. I walked back to him. I placed it on the small table. I looked him straight in the eye. My voice was not loud. It was as cold and hard as the plate. Don't touch, I said. He flinched. His hand, which had been halfway raised, froze. Don't touch what isn't yours, I said. From this day on, you learn to ask, and you learn to be responsible for the answer. He stared at me, the words landing like blows. Then, slowly, he nodded. He pulled his hand back, clasping it with his other, as if to keep it from offending. It was the first time in his adult life he had not reached before he was given. It was a small ritual, a boundary, finally, acknowledged. I took the paper bag from him. I walked to the linen closet. I took out the square of black velvet I had kept in my pocket. I unfolded it. It was just a piece of cloth. I folded it neatly, a perfect square, and placed it on the bottom shelf, deep in the back. Its purpose was finished. It was no longer a secret. It was just an artifact. I turned back. Ethan was still standing on the doormat. I walked to the table. I blew out the first candle, then the second. I turned off the kitchen light. In the moonlit living room, among the ghosts, the small table was perfectly set, every fork, every knife, in its proper place, orderly, correct, belonging to the owner. The screen goes black, no farewells, no follow-up, just the lingering echo of a boundary, finally set in stone, and justice, at last, taking its proper seat at the table. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.